Okay, welcome back. So, just like any expanding market or any expanding idea or any expanding uh, set of ideologies or whatever the case may be, there's always like the base foundation, and then there's things that come along after that that catch traction. So, I mean, there's been, of course, a lot of examples of this, throughout time. We can look at other things, even outside of crypto, to kind of corroborate the thinking on, when things expand. But obviously, for example, when there's the internet, you have the basics, slow dial up, and then you have what we call search engines. There's a couple of those, and then from there, now we have things like ChatGPT. Just an expansion off of something that is foundational. Um, Whatever the case may be, you can look at many other examples. But in short, the thing that a lot of people that are just pure Bitcoiners, they don't want to admit, which once again, you can have your opinion. Everyone's entitled to that. But at the end of the day, it's all about looking to see, hey, well, what is the expansion of this thing here, which is crypto? And what the expansion is other coins, obviously. Now, we all know that there's a lot of fluff. A lot of crypto sucks. There's a lot of crypto that is not going to be here in another 3-4 years. But there is other things that does exist that is going to take market share regardless of tokenomics or, whatever things that people want to hang on to, like, a finite supply or being less decentralized or more decentralized, and this is why this is better because it's faster, or regardless of all of these other narratives and reasonings, expansion is going to be the case, and people vote with their dollars through the years, and this chart shows it. So what we have here, this is the others chart, and others is basically a read. It is a composite of reading the dominance of other coins outside of Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so this is what we call the altcoins. And so obviously altcoins have time periods where they're expanding, just like how Bitcoin expands or Ethereum expands, and where they contract. But the base thing is, a lot of people kind of know about this chart already. What I'm going to do today in this video, and hopefully we can get it done in short order, I'm going to have several ratios that help us see a little bit more of the fragility of the movements when the altcoins decide to move. We'll be able to kind of pinpoint, I guess you can say, with a little bit more accuracy on these movements, and to verify if we have an elongated period of time where we find ourselves in an alt season versus just looking at something so simple like Bitcoin dominance going down. Like, that's just the bare bones basic. So, let's add a couple layers to our knowledge. We'll just start here basically with the others chart, and then we'll go from there. So up first, we can kind of see through time what a bull run looks like. And obviously you have several months in a row where the altcoins are really performing well. Now, once again, this is not ratioed against anything, right? But we can see that this side of the market, so anything that's not Bitcoin, Ethereum, it does grow. Now, the thing is, what we've experienced through time is we've had limited growth, especially this cycle thus far compared to maybe what others have experienced back in 2020 and 2021. I mean, even if you want to take the low, so we'll go back here to January 2023, all the way to the high of where things have been. That's a 500% gain, and so that's just looking at all of these coins and kind of averaging them out, and some have gone up more than that, some have not gone up that much. But what we find out is the market capitalization in terms of growth has gone up about 5x. For these particular set of coins, which is decent. But obviously, you got a 5x from Bitcoin already. So it's not like it's outperforming. Bitcoin was $15,000, and yet it's almost at a 10x as soon as it gets to 150. And it hit 123 already. So Bitcoin has outperformed. I guess you can really just be honest with that. thus far. But as we know, with any type of liquidity or money movement, there's periods of time where that money will slosh around into other things, and that's just the nature of humans. When they make money with something else, they're gonna say, "Hey, what else can I do with these extra dollars that I now have that I didn't have before?" People get a little bit more risk on appetite, and then thus for those gains from Bitcoin will spill over and can spill over even in greater dollar amounts. We're talking hundreds of billions of dollars into the altcoin. So we can clearly see that. I mean, you can go back here in 2020 and see that's a 30x, and we're talking about from March of 2020 to May of 2021, so a year and some change. So within this cycle, it's a real good thing to kind of look at the growth of this overall category of crypto, and this is what a lot of people are holding. So let's just be honest. We really care about this chart, or you should. If you are only tracking Bitcoin and you have altcoins, you probably want to get fond with the others chart, and then also some ratios of this metric here. So as we can see, there's channels where price likes to kind of ping pong through time, and then it breaks right to the upside, several weeks at a time of just euphoria, prices going up, everybody's becoming millionaires, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe not everybody, but a lot of people making money. Now, with that being said, we've been in a similar channel with a couple overthrows, a couple underthrows, but nonetheless, you can see how it's kind of active here within the midline, kind of straddle right below it. Then we popped off here, and that was actually going into 2024. And then, once again, we had it in Q4 of 2024, going into the presidential, was that inauguration, where we had like another really nice jolt of consecutive weeks of, this market capitalization for the altcoins really expanding. And now what we are on, it's looking to be, 3 consecutive weeks, just now starting this third week of nice growth with these a little bit larger candle bodies. So there's promise. There's like, everybody's like, oh, is this it? Is this going to be the wave, right? Well, a couple things, typically with any asset, right? But if we're looking at a composite of assets, it's still kind of something similar. It's like when you break those all times, that's when things like to accelerate a little bit more. So just like an investing rule, which I've had this here for I don't know how long, at least almost a year. If you're investing into altcoins, right, and this is above $500 billion, you are now offsides. You're at the highest risk premium, meaning that, there's less upside for you because you wanted to join so late, but at the same time, more risk simply just because you just don't know when this thing is going to turn around. Now, I have some other metrics, which I'll do another video on, maybe like a little checklist that you need to have to kind of filter through what you should possibly be doing when we are in an expanded alt season, as far as taking profits, what to pay attention to, et cetera, et cetera. We'll leave that for another video. But with that being said, you're definitely offsides, meaning you should not be trying to sell your house, take a whole bunch of leverage, et cetera, to try to get in this market when we're above, like I said, 500 billion. So we're at 300. So, still higher valuation than before, but nothing too crazy yet. Now, what we want to do is, first of all, get back in this channel, which we have recently. Now, what are we going to do when we get to this midline? We'll find out. Is it going to be one of those other failed rallies like we've seen in 2024, those 2 times where we had a nice expansion, but we just came back down just because it wasn't time yet. Money still went into Bitcoin. You'll find that, in short order, you'll have your decision. We'll see here, or literally, really over the next 30 to 60 days, how this is going to play out. Like this is a pivotal time to kind of get what I would call like the first third of the alt season if we find ourselves in an extended alt season. So here's just like the basis of the chart. If we want to bring up some, and I'm going to be using this quite often throughout this video, what we have is the MACD and the RSI. And just the general read on the weekly RSI and the weekly MACD is, guess what? We got positive momentum going higher, as we can see with the chart as well. But so, what we're really wanting to start to pinpoint and start to try to really watch is for some type of momentum that is, exactly much stronger than maybe what we've maybe experienced, what you would say here in 2024, or even better, if we can have a breakout on the weekly RSI which we have an opportunity for coming up if we can reach to the number of about 70, 75, somewhere in there. That'll definitely prove us making a breakout, but then also being higher than this previous peak on the RSI for the others chart. But the cool thing is about TA is what you want to do is you want to marry that up with something else. So what we have price, we have RSI. Let's see if we can marry that up with the MACD. So with the MACD, this also tells us a little bit more about momentum. So with the momentum now showing us some green, so these green candles here, we want to see how fast are these going up. Are these large green candles? Is it like a rapid type movement? That'll be something to see in due time, but that'll let us know the strength on if this is something serious or not. Typically the serious alt seasons, once again, when we kind of bring ourselves to this point in time, they ramp up and they ramp up fast and they are sustained. So you kind of see here, especially on the back end of the alt season, or I would say, the beginning of 2021, the back end of 2020, really starting to see, these taller candles and not just kind of staying low like how we've had previously. And so that's what we're looking for is that, but also alongside that, we want to see these moving averages cross this midline. So there's clearly a midline right here in the middle of this indicator. Now, when these moving averages, the blue moving average being the faster moving average and the orange moving average being the slower moving average, when both of those also go past the midline alongside of green candles, typically that is saying, hey, there's a good chance that we're going to see a sustained period of momentum to the upside. And so, that's clear because, every time that we've had that, I'll make some, indignations right here. So boom, boom, where we have a clear break of these moving averages going past the midline, going past the midline. And even if you want to bring it back here, so we'll go April 2020 going past the midline, and we kind of see in all of those periods of time, all of those phases, what do we find? We see price going to the upside, or market dominance going to upside, market cap going to upside, all same thing, right? So, this is a really good sign to see that we have both things kind of happening at the exact same time, meaning in, short order, like I said, next 20, 30 days, maybe up to 60 days, we're possibly looking for a nice movement to the upside. We're seeing it in things like Ethereum, Solana, but once again, we want to say, okay, what about some of the other things? Out of just the larger things, are these going to move at a faster pace? So let's get into that conversation. So the first ratio that we'll talk about today, outside of just the regular chart for others, is going to be the others ratioed against Ethereum. So just the key thing about ratios, yes, this is not the easiest thing to understand at first, but the more and more that you start to look at them, start to understand them, you're just like, what the heck is this? Like, this is not a price chart saying, hey, this is how much my coin is worth. This is looking at movement and momentum of money. That is the key. If you can understand a ratio, you legitimately step up your knowledge base as an investor, because most people don't get them, which it is what it is. But if you have that power of understanding ratios, it allows you to position yourself much better and fare much better with your portfolio. So what we have here is we have the others to Ethereum ratio. So I just want to give you guys the stuff that a lot of people are not looking at. For example, everybody's going to be looking at Bitcoin dominance going down. That means, yes, alt season. Maybe so, but not quite. Or they may say, okay, well, what about ETH BTC? So when ETH takes off, then the altcoins are going to follow. Okay, well, let's verify that. Let's double check and let's see what that even means. Let's look about the momentum on those topics. So we have others versus Ethereum. So when this is going up, right? So let me see if I can try to make this make sense. So when we see this going up, right? Boom. This is letting us know that the other altcoins are outpacing Ethereum specifically. And so if you want to think about the trickle down of money, so the economics of money, when somebody, like we talked about, makes money in whatever it may be, they say, hey, okay, well, we have extra liquidity. I may be willing to go a little bit more risk on because this is money I didn't have prior. And so what are my options? and Ethereum's going to be like that next safe bet. And then from there, it's just like, okay, well, what else is out here? And that's where the others comes into play. So, there's periods of time, even back here in 2023, and once again, going all the way until late 2024, but even touching up until April 2025, is where people were saying, hey, I'll have on better risk on appetite for others versus Ethereum. But as you can see, as Ethereum has came back to life, it has been sucking a lot of the liquidity, and Ethereum's going up. So that's why it makes sense to have both, right? You should have some Ethereum in your portfolio. Definitely. Ethereum or Bitcoin. Choose one. Or both. Whatever. But, these others, right? These other coins are also worth your while once you understand what these ratios are telling you, right? Through time. So through time, what is it saying? Through time, and you can go back to whatever, but if you want to go back to the beginning, it's making higher lows through time. That's the truth. So the market cap of the other coins, it's growing, and it's not like it's just Bitcoin, Ethereum, and these other things just pump a little bit and then they just go die off for the rest of the cycle. No, they have steady growth through the cycles. And is it the most expansive? Not always, but we're already in something so volatile. Bitcoin and Ethereum are already volatile to the upside really good. So anything plus more than that is like, whoa, that's nuts, right? But just in general, but it does exist. So through time, like we were talking about, yes, this is expanding. And it's easy to see that aspect. And the way that we can clearly see that, all we got to do is just say, hey, do we find higher lows? And so, that's an easy thing to kind of recognize through time. See if I can make that circle there. Higher low, higher low. Yes, a little bit of a lower low, but there's another higher low. And if we turn around, who knows, another higher low. So now as we come about looking at this, what we really are looking for are the pivot points, okay? To let us know, okay, cool, ETH is kind of done running. When are the altcoins going to start making their move? Because ideally, if you're going to be DCAing and stacking up potentially, you want to be doing it before you start to see this thing blistering to the upside. And so what do we find right now? We are actually in a phase where, yes, Ethereum is like, hold my beer, everything else, and is going to the upside. But here's the best part about it. Let's pull up the MACD and the RSI, and this tells us an interesting story. So what I'll pinpoint here is a couple things. When the RSI, the weekly RSI on the others Ethereum chart gets down to these basins, right? So it gets down to the lower portion, maybe it might be around 35 or 30, or maybe even a little bit below it. But where we find ourselves is literally right here at 30. These are potentially really, really good pivot points to where, okay, cool, ETH does its thing. Now it's the others, so other altcoins, time to then start to go up in market capitalization versus Ethereum. And then so we could see that on numerous of occasions, and we find ourselves around that time, where we have the move potential. And so as you can see, every time after one of these vertical lines, right, where the RSI gets low down to 30, you see this pop up in price, right, or pop up in market capitalization, pop up in market capitalization for the others, pop up in market capitalization for the others. And so, but it just depends on how extended, how long it will be, and how powerful. And so if we want to really, really take some case studies here, something like this, where we had, once again, going into early 2021, and we had that a crazy expansion of the others, really, really expanding much faster than Ethereum. And Ethereum is moving fast at this point as well, right? But, 2 times, 1.5 times more speed to the upside for the others versus Ethereum. And so this one is key. So what this is telling us is, okay, Ethereum is doing pretty well. And it, because the thing is, it doesn't stay down here long. It's not like it spends, 3 months down here. Within the next, we're talking two weeks, 30 days, we'll possibly see this start to rebound potentially in this basically starting to shift liquidity over to the other altcoins. And then once again, MACD telling us the same exact thing, right? When we see that this starts to turn into light red and then start to go on the upper bound of the midline and turn green, we're on a nice push, and that's when you'll start seeing SUI start going off. You'll see other things, whatever it might be, that are maybe not in the top 10 start to really expound and go to higher prices, and these are the ones that go and get us the 10x's, the 20x's potentially by the end of the cycle. And so that's the first one. Okay, so next, what we have here is going to be the others, or I guess you can say the BTC dominance ratioed against the others dominance. So first things first, people talk about BTC dominance, but people got to understand that there's other things in the market that take up market capitalization, mainly being stable coins that can kind of throw off a lot of people in their thinking on how the market moves. The key thing is stable coins are going to become an increasing part of this market, especially now that we have this bill that just got passed. The Genius bill and potentially the Clarity bill that might be passed here pretty soon. But with that, kind of being the outlay on the side of government, what we need to do is, like I said, pinpoint specifics. So let's take the Bitcoin dominance versus the others dominance. So we could specifically talk about, not Ethereum. We need to get Ethereum out of here as far as this analysis, which once again, I love Ethereum, to be a little bit more pinpointed on the sloshing of money going all the way down the risk scale, or whatever you want to say, up the risk scale. So what we find here is the same thing. We've been in a Bitcoin dominant type cycle. Like when this flushes to the downside, that's saying, hey, Altseason is really kicking. And so, the way that you first want to take a good look at this analysis is to say, hey, do we have a trend break? And so, when this is popping up, that means Bitcoin's doing this thing. But when you have a legitimate trend break, it comes and tests it and then sloshes back down. This period of time is what a major alt season, looks like, right? All of that. Where it's just like the dominance of the others are really eating up versus Bitcoin. That's what you want, a move like that. And so if we're going to flip this the other way, when it's going up, that's what we look at and say, okay, the others is really doing this thing. So we have been in a Bitcoin regime simply just because the Bitcoin ETFs, these institutional players, they're going to start with Bitcoin, and I don't blame them. Of course, they should. That's the first cryptocurrency to really start to understand before you start to maybe understand some more use case, whatever the case may be. But it's the largest market, the most liquidity, and these other coins are too small for them to even put in money for them to actually say, hey, we can make money off of fees here. So we've been in this whole cycle with a couple of periods of time where we've got some excitement for what we call mini alt runs, mainly kind of being here. I'm going to kind of do some mini circles or mini squares here. So these were those, super exciting times back in 2024. And what we find out is we are on the cusp. And like I said, we're a couple weeks in on this really being something good for the other altcoins. But the key thing here is we're looking for a break of this trend. And then so we want to see this ratio really pop below this trend line to confirm, things are going. Like, just like how it was possibly a little bit hard to confirm if, you're in a significant alt season, before this break, right? Like you were like, things look pretty good, but you don't really know until, like we're coming off of COVID, March. And then once April really starts to come in, it's like, here's where you can really start to identify, things are looking good, because not only time, but the velocity under which this is going down. So, and not turning back up. And so one thing, how do we look at velocity momentum? We bring up our indicator. So all we're looking for in particular is to say, hey, typically when this metric gets to the top end, right? Top end, that's letting you know that people want to go more Bitcoin heavy. especially within, this context of a bull market. But then with that being said, once we hit that top, that's kind of when you want to say, okay, let me make sure I'm grabbing those altcoins, because once again, we spend less than 5% of the time above 70 on this metric. And then so the other 95%, you're literally positioning yourself to be in a really good favorable points if you do your investing into your altcoins at these junctures of these pivots of the capital rotation versus trying to get in altcoins when this is much lower. And so the MACD isn't as helpful for this one, but this one is for sure really, really helpful to look at the RSI. Okay, let's move to the next thing. So speaking of stable coins, what I've done here, same exact thing. Now let's really look at, okay, Bitcoin out the way, Ethereum out the way. What about stablecoin dominance? As we know, when stable coins get printed, when USDT especially, so Tether, they're a big part of this. They always have been. But when Tether gets printed and minted, they go by U.S. backed treasuries. So that's why the U.S. government likes Tether, so to speak. Even though they've actually moved over to their headquarters to El Salvador, but we'll see if they ever actually make it to the United States at some point. But the key thing is, what is the rotation? Because the thing is, how you got to ask yourself, how do people typically get into these smaller market cap type coins? And then so for a lot of this stuff, you have to go through DeFi. The only way to get through a lot of stuff is to use stable coins. That is like the best medium of exchange to get to a lot of lower cap coins, aka others. So with that being said, shouldn't we look at the dominance between, hey, when is the dominance where people are like loading up on stable coins versus when they spend those stable coins on what we call something a little bit more risk on? So this one's pretty easy, because this one really just kind of ping pongs up and down. It's not like, oh my gosh, look at this super growth. Obviously stable coins are growing faster than the dominance of others, because look at the use case for stable coins, like they got a whole bill for it. But just with that being said, this is like an over and under kind of thing. Like if we were to just, let me see here. So we were to just do like a basic channel. So something like that, we can probably see a little confluence here within, direction. And, once again, struggling here at the midline. And I'm actually just doing this fresh. I haven't looked at this channel in this way before, but my eyes kind of was able to kind of spot that. But once again, so when this is going up, that means people are like, let me go ahead and take those profits. Let me just sit in these stable coins. Or this is during a time where a lot of stable coins are being minted and created. But key thing is, when this thing is going down, boom, that's when that money goes to the altcoins. And so what we just experienced over the last couple of weeks, boom, money going to the altcoins with the natural resistance with this ratio here at the midline anyway. So something to look out for. Now, you may say, hey, well, how far can we go down? Well, if we were looking at this channel, like I said, we may have 3, 4, 6 more weeks of just boom, trickling down before we have any type of turnaround or whatever the case may be. Not really looking at time on this one in particular. But once again, let's bring up our information. So the MACD, RSI, same exact thing. What we're looking for is like a nice round trip. With a round trip here, what I mean by that is basically saying, hey, we make it at some point all the way, to the top of this metric, and we go all the way to the bottom. That's just lets you know it's like, hey, you have a nice elongated move for prices to go higher in this case. And so we've already had that touch here at the top of the RSI. We've already broken through the midline. The chances that we continue and go all the way to the bottom of the RSI here at 30, it's increasingly higher and higher, the longer that this goes on. And the key thing is also looking at the MACD, also turning over, staying on the negative side of things, which, for altcoins in this ratio means it's positive. So once again, if this has more momentum and we start to see these candles hopefully get even bigger to the downside, and we start to see these moving averages really start to tank, that means, yes, money is flowing out of stables into the altcoin. So another ratio to kind of keep in mind. Now, one other thing that I'll look at and kind of close out on this video is, like what typically is like the peak of the mania. I would say when people are fully into NFTs, that's like the peak of the mania because that is like the highest on the risk premium for people. Like really, because they're so illiquid. But outside of that, it's really like when memes are really killing it versus everything else. You probably want to take a look at it. And so what I've done here is I've taken quite a few bit of memes where we've looked at Bonk, Pepe, Doge, and Shib. Those are the top four, and we want to ratio that versus BTC. But something that might even be better, which we can even ratio that versus others, because when the memes are growing faster than everything else, that's just like, oh, okay, you're probably starting to reach towards what we call like phase three of an alt season. Like phase one is just like the trickle in, that early rotation from Ethereum going into like the layer ones, et cetera, et cetera. Then layer one's starting to trickle into what we're talking about, DeFi projects, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe some new things, and then phase three is just like memes, new coins that just popped out a week ago or up 3x in a week, like stuff like that. And so when this is really going up versus Bitcoin is something to look at. So what we have here is the weekly chart. And the way that memes work is they're super impulsive. They're much more impulsive typically. If you guys have ever looked at the Doge chart, or if not, I would encourage you to go to look at that. Same thing for Shib, Pepe, Bonk, even in this case. Like when they decide to run, they happen real fast. Like you start to see these major candles, and I mean, if you miss that candle, you missed the move. But with that being said, if we ratio this versus Bitcoin, what we find ourselves is we are starting to slow, because I don't know if you guys remember, even not too long ago, it was literally all about the memes. When this time period was going on, all this stuff was popping, right? Donald Trump is about to be elected. He's got his own coin. There's all kind of just meme stuff going on during that time. And then the MACD is very helpful when you're trying to look at momentum here, is where you're like, okay, memes are even popping back up and there's follow through. What do we see? Same things that we've been talking about as far as the MACD goes. You go past the midline, and then we start to see not only just the positive green candles, but you also see the moving averages go above the midline as well. And then so we have just had 2 weeks of this, and this is no sign of this slowing down, right? Both of these moving averages, I would say, here within the next 2 weeks will probably cross this. And so just once again, all of these ratios are telling me the same thing, that there is a good chance that we'll have some upside over the next 2 weeks, 30 to 60 days. I can't say exactly how long, but things are looking like we have fair weather, not too many headwinds, because of, once again, several different ratios from different viewpoints. Okay. Now, because I've done a lot of videos on, talking specifically just about Bitcoin or a specific coin, or even looking at on-chain data, but this is just looking at capital rotation. And that's something to really learn how to do and how to manage as the alt season gets deeper. So yeah, there's some basic ratios for y'all. This is all about the others. Get in before it's too late. Right? You don't want to find yourself investing over that 100, or was it $500 billion? Yeah, that's not what you want. So let's just see where this goes. We'll find out. Ethereum holding strong at 3,700. Not bad. Solana seems to be having a day. I kind of noticed that earlier. Let's see if we can scroll down there. So Solana at 200. So 200. Not bad. Having a very, very nice candle. But alt seasons are all about follow through. So you need follow through, because we've had these mini alt seasons that kind of got killed off in about, a month at most, maybe like 2 months and some change. Like we need to make it past that. And so I will do my next video will be on like many different indicators outside of ratios that can kind of help you navigate what portion of the alt season that we may be in. But if we were to kind of categorize it as of right now, we're in like the first third of a potential alt season. Money is just barely flowing through ETH and maybe a little bit of trickling into some of these other altcoins over the past 2 weeks. But 2 weeks is too short of a time for us to be able to get a full analysis on everything. But all I can say is now is where you would want to be positioned potentially before anything that might be extremely expansive. But for all those people that are putting the M2 chart out there, the global M2, saying, hey, we are going to follow it. We've been following it pretty good. Bitcoin has been pretty closely correlated to that, but according to that, that may push up to 150,000 Bitcoin, right? $150,000 Bitcoin here within the next 3 to 4 months. So what does that do to altcoins? I mean, obviously higher, but we don't know how much higher. So we'll see if we stay true to that, but we don't know. A macro event could sway things for a little bit. Markets are reflexive. That's the key thing. Don't take any advice and say like, oh, well, this for sure is going to happen. It's all about probabilities and positioning. And the key thing is, got to make sure you have money in the market, because scared money don't make any money. Have something, right? But you don't want to have too more than what you're comfortable with. So that's for your personal judgment. You have to create that framework for yourself. But once you do, let the good times roll. So with that being said, that's it for this video. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.